And part of that is taking a moment to center our relationship with the land we gather on, the history of that land, and to honor the families who have been here for thousands of years. We are hosting from and do our community work on the traditional territories of the people of Treaty 7 region, which is home of the Blackfoot Confederacy, including the Siksika, the Kainai, and the Piikani nations, as well as home to Tsuut'ina Nation, Irish Nakota nations, and home to Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3. We're all treaty people. Treaty 7 was and is a promise between nations to share the land and support one another, to establish peaceful relations, and it is up to each and every one of us to work to make this place and the world better for all future generations. This can and should include being familiar with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action and to be helping to implement them. For those of us who live, work, and are in the community in Calgary, the same is true with the White Goose Flying Report. All Canadians should also know and be helping to implement the calls to action from Reclaiming Power of Place, the final report of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. In light of the announcement from Williams Lake First Nation last week, of the 93 potential burial sites located at the former residential school, we want to remind us of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission call to action number 75. And it says, we call upon the federal government to work with provincial, territorial, and municipal governments, churches, Aboriginal communities, former residential school students, and current landowners to develop and implement strategies and procedures for the ongoing identification, documentation, maintenance, commemoration, and protection of residential school cemeteries or other sites at which residential school children were buried. This is to include the provision of appropriate memorial ceremonies and commemorative markers to honor the deceased children. Let's help to hold our governments accountable to implement this call to action. In addition, actually, there's also the Reconciliation Action Group, of which one of our guests, Michelle, today is intimately involved and has several calls for support right now, including with regards to supporting the Indigenous Gathering Place and with the renaming of Sir John A. Macdonald School. And the municipality water protectors continue to seek support with writing to decision makers in support of no coal mines on municipality land. Reconciliation is a verb, so it requires us taking action and deepening our relationships. So thanks everyone for attending today, and I'll pass it off to Amanda.
So super excited to be in community and in conversation with you all tonight. We're going to introduce ourselves really quickly, but would love if we could all be introducing ourselves to each other through the chat. So please feel free to share your name, the communities that you're a part of, and if you're not here in Mohkinstsis, the lands that you're on right now would also be lovely to know. So my name's Amanda Palmer. I use the pronouns she, her, and I grew up on the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe in a small town in what is currently known as Eastern Ontario. And I've been living here in Mohkinstsis for 8 years, and I'm very grateful to call it my home. And it's here that I uncovered my passion for community development.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tyson Banker. I go by he, him pronouns. I am also part of CDLI, and I've lived in Calgary virtually my entire life. And I'm honored to be able to witness so many different communities and people working together and watching communities grow. And so who I am can be really summarized by my personal slogan, which is to edify others, befriend the lonely, and promote justice.
So Tyson and I have the pleasure of working for CDLI, the Community Development Learning Initiative, which is a Calgary-based network for community-minded people seeking to deepen their connections and capacities to create positive change in our communities. And our work is made possible thanks to our core funders, the Calgary Foundation, the City of Calgary, and the United Way of Calgary. And we like to describe our work as holding space for imagining new futures together, where all people in Calgary welcome each other and work together to take collective action for the common good. And we aim to do this by convening people passionate about community regularly, with several different community conversations happening each month now. And in addition to hosting gatherings and convening, we aim to build capacity, which has primarily been through our training called Success in Community Action, which starts again soon if you're interested. We also seek to be a resource hub, sharing tools, information, connections, and the stories of people and groups doing important work in Calgary and beyond. And a big part of what makes our work possible is by collaborating with others, especially through our learning and action teams. So today's gathering here on mutual aid is made possible due to the Anti-Racism and Decolonization Learning and Action Team, a group of community-minded people who come together in learning and connection to explore how we are and can work towards anti-racism and decolonization in our communities.
So a conversation that we're going to have tonight is on mutual aid. And if you're like me, consistently maybe a little stressed, a little overwhelmed, and can't take our colonial system much longer, we often see a lot of these efforts being demonstrated in those frustrations in places of social media, reflecting on what our politicians are going to be doing, or maybe even seeing sort of those gaps being filled in the charity model, and that those frustrations, thinking of them not really cutting it anymore. And I think really what we want to do is have this conversation around mutual aid has been really demonstrated as a way to see from that response. So those feelings and actions of that sense of nothing is being done, and that hopefully mutual aid is one of the ways that we can begin to sort of fill some of that gaps. And so we saw that really being demonstrated during the pandemic early on, where neighbors were helping each other out. And however, at the Anti-Racism and Decolonization team, we really also noted that community members from specifically BIPOC communities were still being underserved and relying on themselves to still meet those growing needs and concerns. So tonight we really want to honor and highlight those efforts currently being taken on, and also just how crucial mutual aid has been really in the history of our systems, as well as being a really crucial component to our survival and what it means to actually build community. So if you're wondering a little bit of what does mutual aid mean, Dean Spade, who is a trans activist, describes mutual aid as this: a form of political participation in which people take responsibility for caring for one another and changing political conditions, not just through symbolic acts or putting pressure on representatives, but by actually building new social relations that are more survivable. So in summary, mutual aid is looking at solidarity, challenging authority, and how people can participate for mutual liberation.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that setup, Tyson. So just to give you a really quick overview of what you can expect tonight, we're going to shift into our roundtable where our three incredible guests and Tyson will have a chance to talk about their experiences with mutual aid in Calgary and what changes are needed in our city. And we cannot tell you how excited we are to hear from these three incredible people. So thank you all for being a part of us today. And Tyson's going to kind of do some introductions before we get there. But we did want to let you know that there will be a Q&A period after the roundtable conversation. And how that's going to work is we're going to be keeping an eye on the chat throughout the conversation and gathering your questions there. And then we will be kind of sharing some questions during the Q&A on behalf of what you submit in the chat. Just one of our safety measures to make sure that we are taking care to make sure that our speakers are not getting hate in this space, because we know that they face a lot of hate in the online world outside of the space. So if you have questions, please, we want to hear them. We want to share them. Just throw them in the chat and then we'll make sure that they're shared that way. And after the Q&A period, there will be a brief break, and then we're going to go into breakout rooms for some small group discussions, digging into some of what surfaced from the roundtable. We'd love to have you stay and join us for that, but we also know 2 hours on a Monday night can be a lot. So we'll see how you're feeling when we get there. And then we'll bring everybody back to the main room at around 10 to 8 to do a quick debrief together and close our gathering. And with that, I will pass it over to Tyson to introduce our guests.
Great. Thanks, Amanda. I am really honored to have all three guests here and seeing their work and engaging with them in friendship as well. So Michelle Robinson is our Red Thunder woman is Satsu Dene, a mother. She's a podcast host of one of my favorite podcasts, a native Calgarian, and she also runs an Indigenous book club and is now a homeschool mother. So thank you, Michelle, for attending tonight and sharing with your great wisdom. Taylor McNallie from Inclusive Canada. She is the true definition of a serial entrepreneur, a brand developer, marketing strategist, public speaker, MC, badass music journalist, and a civil rights activist. Taylor is an all-around powerhouse. Born in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Taylor moved to a small town in Alberta in 2001, where she had her first harsh experiences with racism. She's been learning how to have tough conversations and addressing racism ever since. When the murder of George Floyd sparked worldwide unrest in 2020, creating the largest civil rights movement in history, Taylor co-created Inclusive Canada, which was previously known as Rural Alberta Against Racism, to bring conversations regarding racism and anti-racism into rural communities across Alberta. The organization, which consists of Black, Brown, and Indigenous women, focusing on providing an educational approach by offering anti-racism learning sessions for businesses, organizations, institutions, and individuals who wish to commit themselves to being anti-racist and dismantling the oppressive systems that uphold harm to racialized, marginalized, and vulnerable communities globally. Taylor's perspective and commitment to bringing awareness and an end to systemic racism inspires her audiences to get involved and support local initiatives hands-on. Thanks, Taylor. And we have Yvonne Henderson from Bear Clan Patrol Calgary. And Yvonne is one of the incredible people who makes Bear Clan Patrol Calgary possible as one of their lead organizers. For those of you who don't know, Bear Clan Patrol is a volunteer-run organization that emerged in response to a need to protect the women, children, elderly, and vulnerable community members in Mohkinstsis. A few times a week, and I highly encourage folks to get out as well, if those who feel comfortable, to patrol throughout Calgary to assist with anyone in need of basic necessities, including food, clothing, blankets, and other supports. A key aspect of the Bear Clan Patrol philosophy is meeting people with a zero judgment and getting them to where they need to be for that moment. So thank you, everyone, to our panelists so much for being here tonight and providing all of us with your insights and wisdom. And we really, and I'm really excited for this conversation. So I will start off with from each of the panelists about what does mutual aid look like for you. And so I know each of you have different ways in which that's demonstrated in your actions and your activities. But what does mutual aid look like for you? So I'll start with Michelle, and then we'll go with Taylor, and then Yvonne.
Hi, everybody. Oki, really nice to meet everybody. I'm really honored to be here. So I just, on behalf of myself, thank you so much for having me as a guest. And you know, Tyson, it's funny because prior to the pandemic, mutual aid looked different to me than it does today, because now I'm on the receiving end of a lot of mutual aid. Prior to the pandemic, to me, a lot of mutual aid was more taking phone calls and giving free counseling and resource to folks who were in distress at the time. And you know, contrary to a lot of people's beliefs, there's actually not very many Indigenous friendly supports for folks. And it was a huge gap, especially with the families that were dealing with their loved ones going missing or going murdered. And, you know, that constant, oh, thank you, honey, that constant belief system that, you know, we have the distress center, but I've volunteered there. It's not meant for Indigenous people. The average person there has their anti-Indigenous bias, et cetera, et cetera. Then since the pandemic, obviously it's changed a lot. When I worked with 12 CSI, we were trying to get basically a Bear Clan going, but I could not get involvement from community. And I was so grateful when community created Bear Clan for our area, because it was so needed. And again, being able to give people resources without that judgment, etc. This is the type of thing that we needed. But since the pandemic, boy, has everything changed. It was hard enough to access services prior to the pandemic. And now, if you don't have, you know, if you work, you don't have access to any of the services. If you are trying to access via the phone, the assumption you have the ability to be able to call and spend 8 hours on hold, it's ridiculous. It's almost impossible, actually. So there are many issues here that we have. Even white people are having problems with distress center. So, just to give an idea, if you have anti-Indigenous bias, how much more difficult it is, actually. So anyway, geez, I feel like I keep going on, so I apologize, Tyson. Do you want me to keep talking?
Well,
maybe we pass it on.
Yeah. Well, I'll just ask one question, I guess. What is one of the values that maybe you've learned in the last couple of years since the pandemic and seeing that transition be really important moving forward?
Yeah, so I hope that moving forward that we see that, well, it's kind of hard to encapsulate how the pandemic has affected mutual aid in general, but the bigger picture that I would really love to see people do is support the organizations that have been, doing that work. Even Bear Clan, it kind of took a bit of a pause at the very beginning of the pandemic because all of us were too afraid to, what do we do? So it was really great to see them moving forward and such. For me, obviously, Zoom was a huge pivot, and us being able to do one-on-one conversations has been enormous for a lot of folks who need that care. I wish that we could do more in-person things, but it's just almost impossible with the pandemic. But at the end of the day, me grabbing money, giving it to different Gmails, etc., doing e-transfers, and then vice versa. Now I'm on the receiving end, it seems, more than anything. Understanding that is the type of thing that we have to do. But I have a friend today who dropped off lasagna and cookies. Mutual aid can look like drop-off boxes, care boxes. And, I did that during the pandemic for friends that were struggling with COVID but didn't want to be open about it, but still needed grocery runs. This is the type of thing that we can do. And moving forward, I hope we consider doing to friends as well. Mutual aid in different ways. I have a friend coming to pick up a bunch of my boxes that I had to use for moving. Mutual aid can look so different, kind of like a trader, a barter system for some folks as well. And then for Indigenous people, if you can get your Narcans and then donate them to Bear Clan. In my case, I'm literally on the C train, so now I can start to just give them out to people as I go. Which I've been doing since I moved back to Calgary. It's just been, I think people just have to think bigger, they can give. Going to the dollar store and picking up socks, it's so easy to pick up socks and give it to homeless people along with Narcan or whichever it is that you can give. So, these are things that you can do as folks. I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, I mean, I want to add that just really quickly, something that you even said yesterday in your podcast was like the idea of just like carrying Naxalone and Narcan, for example, as like a way to just like be prepared to, as we walk through the community. Taylor, please feel free to share with us that question about what does mutual aid mean for you?
Yes, well, hello. Thank you so much for having me. And it's so lovely to see your face, Michelle. Hi. I miss you so much. Mutual aid for me is basically the direct action of alternative responses. So, in the wake, I shouldn't say in the wake, but people becoming more aware of like the defund movement and abolition movements. It's really easy to just say defund the police or abolish these systems, but without having anything in place. That's what a lot of people want to know is, okay, we get rid of these systems and then what? And mutual aid is that and then what? It shows what is possible by community and what we're capable of. And I think for me personally, the idea of, reforming systems or decolonizing spaces is not something that is really possible or sustainable. I don't think we're able to ever rely on the systems that have caused harm in the first place or have put us in these positions in the first place. And what we need to focus on, especially as racialized individuals to lead these spaces, is to create new spaces. That's why I get so involved with Bear Clan, because it is a direct action of mutual aid in so many ways, whether that's alternative measures to calling the police, if that's alternative measures to calling shelters where there's no room or somebody needs a ride or anything is going on, being able to come together as community and provide the necessary care that our community requires. Obviously, we're well aware that these systems and institutions are not for us. They're not getting better. And what we have done in the past is not working. But what has worked is the mutual aid efforts. Mutual aid, like you said, the history of mutual aid, it's not a new thing. This is something that, especially for Black and Indigenous communities, for hundreds of years have been doing before colonization. And it wasn't called mutual aid. We were just taking care of each other. It was just a normal thing, right? It's just community care. But then when you look at people or organizations like the Black Panthers who created, free breakfast programs and their own street patrols, that was taking matters into their own hands and doing things. And, when people do radical movements like that, they end up being killed by the state anyway, or jailed, or something happens. So they're doing something right when they want to criminalize your work in caring for the community. So I think it's really important that we continue looking to our ancestors and those before us who have been doing this work and adopt those practices rather than trying to fit into spaces that are not meant for us to begin with.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Taylor. We was reading something that just really affected me. The Underground Railroad was a form of mutual aid, and it's Yvonne, I'm curious from your perspectives, what does mutual aid look like for you?
Well, mutual aid, I just want to say thank you for letting me tune in. Mutual aid is exactly what Taylor said. It's literally taking care of each other, getting offline and getting it done where other people wouldn't go. With the Bear Clan Patrol, it's not just me. It's a whole team of us that we come together every week when there's a call and our phone is going off. We have a huge team that just steps up, and there's community that says, hey, we trust you more than the police. We trust you more than the first responders. We trust you more than anyone else because you've seen us at our lowest points. And we have so many elders that we're servicing right now with food hampers, basic necessities. And it's just basically filling in the gaps that people don't want to fill in. And we are not funded. We are not a part of a government system. We're grassroots. We don't have any of the city of Calgary funding. We have an amazing space under a Good Neighbor community market, and it's super awesome to be there. We were operating out of the Border Crossing Bar and Grill, and Heather and Bunny are still huge supporters of what the entire team does. So mutual aid is just like Taylor said, what we should be doing, right? And it's not for us taking pictures, posting, saying, look at what I can do. It's just what people should be doing, right? And so many people don't.
Thank you, Yvonne, for sharing. Yeah, that's one of those principles I've just heard you say is that trust piece. People trust us to be, or whomever, to be able to take on that care. So thanks for sharing. The next question I have here, and specifically around what's ongoing in Calgary. So what are the conditions that have contributed to the growth in mutual aid in Calgary? And what have you learned from your experiences? So just reflecting on what are some of the, thinking about those challenges of doing mutual aid specifically in Calgary. So what are some of those conditions that have contributed to mutual aid in Calgary? So I'll work around with going Taylor, Taylor, Yvonne, and then Michelle. That works. So Taylor, how's your experience been? But also, what are some of the things that you've what are some of those factors that are happening in Calgary?
Yeah, I'm not even sure how to answer this because definitely nothing makes it easy in this city to do absolutely anything. I don't know if things have, mutual aid has gotten better or grown in Calgary over the pandemic. Maybe for a really short period of time when people, want to go in their performance basket and be like, look, I'm helping, look at what I'm doing. And it doesn't last very long. Because, organizations like Bear Clan, they were here before the pandemic. A lot of the organizations still doing work were here before the pandemic. My organization was one that started around the time the pandemic began. And luckily, you know, I'm still out here. I will be out here doing it. But yeah, Alberta has a different umbrella of what is happening in this province compared to other places, I feel, especially when it comes to racialized Black and Indigenous folks coming together and working together. I feel like we get a lot more pushback here, given the political climate that has always been holding us. It's really, it's like a roller coaster of emotions all of the time, because I look at cities like Vancouver and Toronto and all these other places where Black and Indigenous folks are just coming together and doing the thing all of the time. And here we're just still so separate and almost segregated in a way, even down to our communities. Like, if people think segregation still doesn't exist for Black and brown communities, it's a lie. It's happening. And that's what keeps us separated and from mobilizing together. So I don't know if I have much of an answer to this, because I don't see much growth happening. I just see people steady doing it. And I think that is probably what keeps it going here, is the consistency and the dedication of people doing the work. And, you know, getting some new folks involved along the way. Maybe Michelle and Yvonne has some more positive response to that.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Taylor. I think you really set up like that, like the landscape of what I think what that feeling is like here. And I would definitely agree. Yvonne, curious, yeah, what are some of the conditions that you've been seeing here in Calgary of the growth of mutual aid?
What have I seen since we started with Bear Clan? The reason why Bear Clan started originally is when Gitsterand had a call, it was because there was a call for the community to have Indigenous support. So myself and 6 other founders came together, and there was nobody servicing the community. We heard of other mutual aid groups, like Be the Change was out there. There was Dope Team, you know, but nobody was actually specialized in being Indigenous in the front lines and dealing with Indigenous people the way that we do. We are not vigilantes. We're not a gang. We're not going to go jump people. We're out here to support people where they are at with zero judgment. We're not going to tell them they need to change their life. We're just there to support them and whatever that looks like. So when we started Bear Clan, it was a radical idea almost, because we started literally from our own houses. And I always say this, we started from our own houses and we just kind of grew to where we are now. And we still continue. And I say thank you to everybody that shows up on Thursdays to pack lunches, and for everyone that shows up on Friday nights to patrol. And the police used to laugh at us because they said, oh, you're another do-gooder community patrol. Haha, you'll be gone in a month. 6 months went by. The police were like, oh, you guys are serious. A year went by and the police were like asking us for help, you know, and that's how it's always gone in Indigenous and Black communities, is that it was always just a dream that somebody wanted to do something and take the streets back, and we actually have. So with that being said, when the police come up to us and they're like, oh, Mamacita, you know, you're really good at finding lost people. You're really good at finding lost kids. And I'm like, yeah, and I'm not a cop. Like, yeah. I'm not paid to do this. I do this because we should be looking for our people that are misplaced. We should be supporting them. And it's sad when we have so many families that contact us in a week and they openly say, like, people don't support them. The police don't support them. And they laugh at them and they say, well, you know, they're gone partying, or, you know, your family member is going to turn up. Like, don't worry. But to us, it's like, I know what it feels like to have a family member that's gone missing and they come back deceased. Mm-hmm. And it hits close to home. So when you're talking about mutual aid, it's growing. There's a lot of groups that provide mutual aid. There's so many groups in Calgary now. And we've just stayed consistent with our message, with our delivery. we've just stayed consistent, and we've done a lot of overtime with our clan patrol. And it's not like, again, like I say, it's not just me. The volunteers that step up, the elders that patrol with us, the community members, everybody who comes together each week, those are the heroes. Those are the people need to be talking to, because they're the ones that show up every single time. They're the ones that deserve the most recognition.
Curious, Yvonne, right before we go to Michelle, I'm just wondering, when the CPS are saying, hey, like, you know, give us advice, and one of your philosophies is no judgment, right? But like, what do you tell them when it's like, do this a bit differently, or have you thought about this, or join us? Like, I'm curious. I don't know if that's even the best thing, but like, I'm just curious, like, what do you say to them?
Well, when they contact us, it's like, I'm like, oh, hi, like, have you tried thinking like a 15-year-old kid? Have you tried, like, you know, taking off your badge and gun for a second and walking around downtown in plain clothes? Have you tried maybe connecting with them over social media? Have you tried, like, getting in touch with their friends? Have you tried getting in touch with their community? Like, I always find it very challenging when police come to us, because it's always like the same thing. It's always the same narrative, the same script. Like, you're still around. Oh, you're still around. You're still doing this. How come you can locate people and we can't? And I'm like, because I don't have a badge. I have my patch, and my patch, just because I'm wearing it on patrol, it's in my heart. My patch is in my heart. That patch never comes off. But there's also the community connections that we've made. And people know that when I'm seeing them and I see them, and if they're active in addiction, they took off with the boyfriend, wherever they may be and wherever I encounter them, I'm not going to sit there and go, hey, 911, I found your person. I'm going to first check in with them. And I'm going to be like, hey, did you eat today? Are you okay? Do you need clothing? Do you need to take a shower? I do basic check-in with them. And I ask them, and I let them know that their family's looking for them and whether they want to establish contact or not. Because it's all about consent.
Right. What a radical, thank you so much for that. Like, what a radical shift in what it means to feel safe, and to be what safety can actually feel like for people. Curious about your thoughts on the conditions that are in Calgary here that are growing mutual aid.
Just hearing Yvonne talking, it just reminded me of so many situations. So I'm in Abbeydale, and when Colton Crochet went missing, it was a total community-based search. It wasn't at that time Bear Clan didn't exist, and that was when, with 12 Community Safety Initiative, we were trying to show this is a really needed necessary thing. And just to give folks an idea, you're not going to believe this, but at that time, we didn't have a single police officer allowed access to Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or anything. So when Yvonne says, have you tried reaching out to them? Police are literally not allowed to have the very means of communication that we all utilize. So of course, that's a huge barrier for them to be able to do anything anyway. Ironically, it probably keeps people safer anyway. Again, to Yvonne's point about consent, when I worked at volunteered at the distress center, they made it very clear, you must report this, and this. And I believe that that's a huge barrier and a huge problem for folks to be able to be honest about what their situation is, because even myself, depending on who the crowd is and who the person is, I will not divulge certain information, because I know the guidelines that Alberta has for what people are allowed to report or not report. And after my experience of giving birth to my daughter, I will never, ever encourage intervention by a social worker, by a nurse, police officer, without consent. So when I help folks with police, it is sometimes it can take a month. You have to ask them for their permission if they want that contact. Then we give them the contact, and then it takes them time for decide to, establish contact. And then once they've established contact, that doesn't mean they're in the position to reply right away. So sometimes it can take months to build a relationship with one police officer, let alone, a social worker or someone else. And if there's a bad experience, like the distress center, I try to tell people to call back and try to get a different voice. Same with Awutan. There's so many different resources that depending on who the person is, because a lot of folks, and I hate to slam anyone who absolutely is going to be seen in this, but a lot of the practicums that are done through the universities are time at the distress center, time at Awutan, and like they're so not prepared for the conversations of my son just got the crap kicked out of them by the police. They need help. They need aid. How do I help them? Because they're like, I've never heard of a police officer hurting anybody who didn't deserve it, right? So when Yvonne says judgment, that's unfortunately what we deal with when I go into a doctor's office or something. When was the last time you had a smoke? When was the last time you had a drink? When was the last time you were doing drugs? When was the last time you were doing cannabis? Those are the first questions out of their mouth instead of what's wrong? How can we help you? I've told my family when I have a stroke, I will probably die that day. And it is likely because if I go into the emergency, it'll be met with another fucking drunk squaw. And I apologize for my language, but that is how the nurses and doctors and medical community treats us. So when Yvonne talks about that, imagine being houseless and being treated like that on a regular basis. Police beat us all the time and nobody holds them accountable. So you can understand our frustration with seeing other protests and not seeing any intervention, or worse, the intervention is kind and loving and beautiful broski pictures with police and community. But if you notice the color of their skin, there might be a reason why.
Thanks, Michelle. You've really, I think, been able to talk about the various layers as to which I think the reason and why mutual aid is growing. And I say that knowing that the mutual aid is a response to the impacts that many of our communities are facing. It's not necessarily always the ideal. And so with that question in mind, and I'll ask Yvonne to start first, is at its core, mutual aid is also about actively changing the systems that are oppressing, harming, and even killing us. And so, curious about how you are able to also do the work that you do, but then also challenge some of these norms, like as you're saying with the Calgary Police Service and different other institutions. So how do you respond to that?
Every day I'm alive as an Indigenous female, being Nitsitapi from Siksika is an act of resilience. Every single day that I'm here and every single day that I'm caring for the community alongside my team, that's a huge act of decolonization and resilience. And it's, again, these systems are put into place to keep us down. The systems are meant to keep people in a certain way. So when we're standing up and we're speaking out against them and we're saying, hey, don't treat people like that. When we're holding dope team accountable for a 3 or 4 hour wait, we're saying, okay, you can't make it, we will transport the person. When victim services is contacting Bear Clan after hours and they're saying, Yvonne, we have somebody who would rather talk to you than anyone else, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm like accompanying them with other members of our team to the hospital, that's us changing the system, because so many service providers look at us and they're like, why are you successful? Why is it that people who end up incarcerated, who end up in hospitals, who end up in whatever situation they are, they say, call the Bear Clan, call this number, send them a message, send them an email, send them something, So we're actively just out there supporting people wherever they are. And that's helping change the system. I know I'm not going to make a huge dent in my lifetime. I know I'm not ever going to get any of our world leaders to, change homelessness in my lifetime, but we can at least fight it. We can at least fight for a better system. We can try to fight to dismantle the system because it's not serving people. It's not serving Black and Indigenous people right now. It's keeping them on the street, begging for them to get into a shelter so that they can give their name and they can say, oh, I've been waiting here for 3 hours. You know?
Yvonne, you're speaking something, a lot of what you're saying is so powerful, but one of the things I wanted to ask is like, and I've been on your end too, where it's like, how are you so successful at doing what at ABC? And sometimes I have to question, what do you mean by success? Like that challenge of like, can you just go into that a little bit more about maybe like even just the idea that there's two very different layers to, I mean, they think success could be, I still don't really know, but I'm curious for you if you think about that.
Yeah, it's always strange when someone says that to us, whenever they question us, you're still here, you're successful. And I'm like, hey, no, we are just staying according to what Winnipeg has taught us, to the OGs in Winnipeg, what they have taught us, what they have shown us. And our level of service is like total, like we don't ever take anybody's first and last name. We don't ever sit there and say, oh, you have to provide ID for a service. We never ever tell them, oh, you have to jump through these additional barriers, that in order to receive service. It's like so many people are so tired of going through all the hurdles of saying, I need help right now. And they get really tired of providing the same answers to 6-7 different people. So when you ask me what success is when I go to our den under Good Neighbor and we're preparing our lunches and there's somebody else other than myself doing it. That's a success. Awesome. When our community comes together and they gather on Fridays and it's more than just myself, that's a success. When I'm handing out anything that we are given and that person comes and they say, we're donating to you because we know it's going to go back to the people, that's a success. When somebody donates $1 to us and we're able to put that directly to the people, that's a success.
Awesome.
When I'm shaking hands and sitting with the people that are forgotten on the streets of Calgary, when I'm sitting with sex trade workers, when I'm sitting with people who are caught in the struggle and they feel like they're not alone, to me, that's a success. That's a huge success, and that's humbling, and that's what I love to do. And I love that our core team gathers and that people, I never feel afraid walking anywhere. I never feel afraid or hesitant of going up to anybody. And I just love that there's a generalized understanding of who our team is. And that when they see our patch, they see our hoodies, that they're like, they feel a sense of calm. They don't have to ever feel like we're going to take them down. We're going to put their photo up for our funding. That we're ever going to be like, hey, we're going to use your image so we can get more money. No, that's a success.
Michelle, would you mind responding to that question, or any thoughts about how we support people? Metroid's also challenging some of these systems, and you've kind of spoken a little bit about it, but
boy, where do I even start? So for folks who don't know, I now work at a registry, and one of the most heartbreaking things I watch day in and day out are these agencies that, as Yvonne said, you take your picture and selfie and be like, yeah, look at me, I'm helping someone. And they use that in order to get the funding from the government. And when they do that, you know what they're using that for? They're using it for an ID that we are going to give to them after their service pays us. We give them their ID, and then the cops beat the crap out of them, take their wallet and toss it, and they have to start the whole process over again to try to get their ID, going through a service like CUPS, Mustard Seed, Children's Services, Sheldon Schumer, and going through this entire process again, just so that when a cop sees them again, they can take their ID and throw it in the garbage and start this entire process over again. And such a disgusting cycle where our, well-meaning tax money or well-meaning donation money goes straight into giving people IDs that we know that when they go into custody will be stolen. If they go into one of these shelters will be stolen. There's just not safety for folks who are houseless in any capacity. And then there's barriers. Being at a registry now, seeing the barriers that people have in order to access their Alberta healthcare number, I can't believe we make houseless people go through this, but this is exactly what we voted for, right? Like everybody's like, oh, I want to cut down that red tape. But what they actually do is create so much red tape. They actually create new agencies to do all of this work that really is meaningless and pointless. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, you know who you are. If you you can say your name, you can say your birthday, you should be able to access healthcare. But we're not in that space anymore. You're expected to show your healthcare card. And if you're a person in perpetuous houselessness because of, stolen IDs of shelters, et cetera, this is almost an impossible task. And that's not even including water, basic needs, water, food, clean clothes, showers, nothing. So, it's really disgusting what I see every day. I go onto the C train to watch the transit cops and the police officers beat the crap out of houseless people to get them out of the C train station. So Karen, who called the manager, can happily go all the way to, whatever downtown that she needs to go. So it's been really awful seeing those barriers that are created by the so-called systems that are meant to help people. It's not helpful. And I think anybody who's ever tried to contact some of these services actually know how difficult they are. AHS, because of the COVID, the pandemic, they're impossible to get a hold of. And I work at a registry and I can't get a hold of them. So, we're regular people supposed to change their QR codes if that's the barrier, whichever. So anyway, that's, I guess, why we have MLAs. But, people, they don't know. MLAs don't know. I quit talking to my MLA because every time I talk to him, I have to give him some, free education that I don't want to give him. So anyway, those are some of the barriers that I've been seeing so openly, and I hope I answered that for you, Tyson.
Oh, thank you. You gave us a bit more perspective of how challenging it is. Taylor, for yourself, how is that? How is mutual aid and challenging sort of the systems that Michelle and Yvonne have spoken to?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, like I pointed out in the first question of how, it's not possible to reform and rebuild or decolonize these spaces, that it's going to take the people to do that. And, like the base of Inclusive Canada, because the other two women who are involved are teachers. One's a historian. They're very, very knowledgeable people, very well educated, very smart, street smart, all the way around. They have that. And our base of Inclusive Canada is providing education, because I think that, like somebody in the comments, like, I didn't realize it was that bad. There's so many things that are happening all of the time, and people don't really realize that those things are happening, or they don't realize all the barriers that we face, or when we tell them, well, people are accessing the shelter because of barriers. They're like, well, like, why are they staying on the street? And there's just all of this laundry list of barriers that people don't understand, or that, so many people have it in their minds still that people are on the street because they want to be. Nobody wants to be on the street. That is the most ridiculous thing I can hear anybody say. And it's like, anytime I hear somebody say that, it's like, am I going to put an hour into this person? Am I going to walk away? But we have to be able to educate others so that others can educate their families, their friends. People aren't listening to me. They ain't listening to a Black woman. People are listening to Indigenous women. They are silencing us. So we need to be able to educate who we can so that they can go talk to Uncle Jim, and they can go talk to their coworker, Linda, and all these people who will not give us the day or the time of day. Education is really important in pushing mutual aid to change these systems. Or not necessarily change them, but so we can hold them more accountable. When the Calgary Homeless Foundation. And what I'm just coming to realize now as well is that it seems like the city of Calgary basically leaves the Calgary Homeless Foundation kind of in charge of the funds on what is happening in these sectors. Not even recently, what I don't know if it was like a month or 2 months ago, before we had that crazy cold snap, they released $750,000 that was meant to go to initiatives to help unhoused folks and the outreach teams that are serving these communities. But it took not even a lot of us, but a good handful of us being on, pardon my French, being on their asses here for months on Twitter. Like, the things I get achieved through Twitter is amazing, because it's like, once you call somebody out, they're like, oh, we actually got to listen, rather than making a phone call, rather than sending an email. And it's sad that that's what it takes, but it took people coming together and calling those things out and saying we need change. And I mean, they released $750,000. Have we seen any of that? I mean, we've seen some sleeping bags, we've seen some hats, I haven't seen $750,000 go to anywhere that these people need, other than them just trying to push people back into a drop-in center where they don't want to go, where it's extremely abusive, extremely dangerous, and there's no wraparound supports within these systems. So it takes just educating more people so that more of us can be louder in holding these systems and institutions accountable, and show people that things are not okay out here. There's a lot of issues that need to be addressed. Otherwise, we're just going to keep running on this hamster wheel.
I'm wondering, and all three of you sort of have suggested this, so I'm going a little bit off script a little bit, but so often I think, and Yvonne really highlights, or even like what Bear Clan does is, serving Indigenous people in a way that these other agencies, in which I would probably like to maybe different white serving agencies, just don't do or can't do. Mm-hmm. And I think, and that challenge that I see, or the challenging that system is like, well, where are those groups, and being able to like really, give that $750,000 to be able to say, hey, you actually do this better. Like when the Calgary Police Service is saying, hey, we have our liaison officers, we do all of this stuff. I mean, that's part of the value of defund maybe, but we do all of this stuff, and yet we're still calling an agency that are a group of people who are coming together who do it better. So I'm just curious if anyone has any thoughts about that being such a value to mutual aid, or why that might be the case, that like specific groups do it better when they're serving people.
I can tell you, like, a lot of the barriers are policy and procedures that a lot of the colonial nonprofits have. For example, when we had Voices never formed an official board per se. Mm-hmm. And so we actually were able to do a lot more as a result. Sovereign Spirit's the same concept as well. So a lot of these boards are really hampered because they need to do, 2-year projecting funding, and they need to stay on, their quarterly projection of each grant and show the work that they've done, et cetera, et cetera. So that allows zero room for pivot. And, back to what Taylor was saying with the $750,000, I mean, it's insane to me. And I mean that, I don't mean to be ableist. It is actually insane to me that we give homeless people a tent and sleeping bag, knowing in a week the police are going to come and steal it all and throw it in the garbage, and we have to give them again a tent and a sleeping bag because the police are cleaning up, but they literally just took all of the possessions that people have collected over a week to try to survive living outdoors, just to do it all over again. So, it's ridiculous. I cannot understand how people don't see the money that we are investing is so inappropriately being used right now. And I think it was Yvonne that used the word sex trade. I mean, part of the reason why women have to, not just women, anybody does sex work. And the reason why they have to is usually being at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder. So, for example, as an Indigenous woman, I'm at the bottom. Who's even below me? Indigenous Two-Spirit. Black people of color, women of color, always below men. These are real issues, and people don't want to highlight them, but then they look around at work and they're like, who do I see here? White man, white man, white man. Ooh, white woman. white man, white woman. That's it. So of course we're into so-called illegal work because we can't get regular work because none of the organizations will hire us. So, there's so many levels of barriers and this is wrong. We don't make accommodations. So for folks with disabilities, they were rightfully upset during the pandemic when we made the switch to online work. And they were like, we've been asking for this forever to accommodate us and you won't do it. And it's like, now that it affects everyone, we make this allowance. And now that there are some people that are like, I really prefer this, now companies might actually allow that, which will be incredibly helpful for folks with disabilities. And again, there's women, Indigenous Two-Spirit, Indigenous with disabilities. Like it's pretty clear who's at the bottom of the ladder, and obviously all rooted in colonialism as well. So I want to keep talking, but I better pass the mic back to you, Tyson. I hope we outlived that one good.
No, thank you. Does anyone else want to just speak a little bit to that before we get to the last question?
I don't even remember the question now. I will be honest.
I guess the question is why does a group like Bear Clan able to, and I know we know why, Yvonne really spoke to that, but just a little bit more interest in how you would frame why I guess like when I say like white serving organizations and institutions aren't able to serve in whatever they want to define as success in comparison to maybe to Bear Clan, which is saying, yeah, we are able to actually go in there and really serve people in the way that they actually need to be served. And yet there are so few of that, even though what we're seeing is that's actually what can be successful.
I mean, point blank, they don't want to. Period.
Okay. Yeah.
I feel it's sad because a lot of the things we do as humans, we do because we have a connection to it. We do it because we see ourselves in it. When something pops up, if we could see ourselves in those people's shoes, or you feel like it affects you, then you feel more inclined to get involved and take action. So, a lot of the folks involved with a lot of the outreach team, grassroots team with Bear Clan, it's because we ourselves have been in these really awful situations. For me, I was a single mother for 10 years. I left an abusive relationship. I have gone through some things and have had to fight through these systems. So of course, I have a connection to that and know how terrible it is, but also it allows me to also see somebody else's humanity and how they could have gotten to where they are because that was me. And the reality is, for a lot of white people, they don't have to go through those challenges. And if they do, it's not as tough going through those systems to get the support and help they need. And so if it's something that's not affecting you immediately, it doesn't seem, and I'm gonna bring it up. I don't know why I'm bringing it up, but I'm bringing it up. We're gonna talk about the truck convoy for a minute, okay? With the white nationalist truck convoy, I'm gonna say it how it is. Even before they started going wild over the pandemic, these groups and these people have been out here. Black and Indigenous people have been out here warning the public of these people, what they're doing. I personally have been doing it for 2 years. I went back on my on Facebook post saying, like, don't come say I didn't tell you so. Like, we've been saying it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. But because these people don't really negatively impact other folks, it's not an immediate thing to them until it's too late. And that's where we're too late. So we need people to be able to get activated and do something now. But that's why these organizations are not successful, because it's not community based. It's not about the people. It's about looking like you're doing something. It's about getting money. It's about how to be successful in this Western world sense of successful by having money and what you have, rather than success of your entire community. So that's why they're not successful, and especially why grassroots organizations, like even Inclusive Canada, I will never register with the government. I don't want to be tied to the colonial system. I don't want to take their money. I don't want to have to jump through hoops to take their money and then be told how to spend that money, and it doesn't go directly to the community. And that's why it's so important for people to support grassroots, community-led, volunteer-led organizations rather than nonprofits who, even if they are the most pure at heart, there are so many barriers into how you can use that money still for the people. So it's not going back to the people.
Thanks so much, Taylor, for that. Yeah, I mean, the word about mutual aid is that liberation. And I think about the convoy and I think about to myself, what does it mean to actually liberate? Like, what does that actually mean when we talk about liberation or freedom? And Yvonne, I'm just curious a little bit if you had any thoughts, but the next question will be, how can people get involved in mutual aid, whether it's supporting your efforts or starting their own? So we'll just do one final round with that question in mind. But if there's anything else that you wanted to share, please do. But if there's anything around how people can get involved, and then we'll get into a Q&A. So who would like to kind of take a first crack at that question of how can people get involved?
Well, I started the Calgary, I started the book club, and we were originally meeting at the basement of the Calgary Library, and they created all the barriers for us to not be there, actually. So we would start by going outside and smudging and, doing our book club downstairs. And even then, it was hard to book. They just were not helpful in any capacity. So after a few years, when they, like Yvonne said, they realized we're kind of here to stay. So then they finally started to work with me a little better. Anyway, the whole purpose of the book club is to educate folks who are committed to wanting to understand more about Indigenous people. And for Indigenous people, it's a safe space for them where they speak first. And then, of course, we have the Reconciliation Action Group for folks to get involved there. So to me, reconciliation means action. Wearing an orange shirt is an act. It's an important act on September 30th. It's an important act every time there's a new announcement on the amount of graves that were rediscovered. But that said, like, settlers need to see their role in doing the work and not expecting Indigenous people to do all of the work. There's so much work to do. And as Indigenous people, I can speak for myself. I try to support the settlers willing to do the work. That's what I do. So a lot of the students were interested in doing name changes. So that's where a lot of our effort has been focused. But I would love to see it expand into a justice committee, into a health committee, into an education committee, doing all of that work. And, a lot of our members are involved with different organizations. So they work with their organizations and the Reconciliation Action Group to try to get things done. So for folks who are interested, there's the book club, and there's also the Reconciliation Action Group as places to go. But obviously, I also encourage everything Yvonne and Taylor are about to say as well. So with that.
Thanks, Michelle. Appreciate you. Yvonne or Taylor?
Yvonne, where are you at? Are you still in here? Okay, you go.
There's so many things. So many things. People can literally, like, I get it. COVID's scary, right? We don't want to get sick. We don't want anyone to get sick. But if people want, they can literally, like Michelle's initiative that she was talking about, get involved with that, get involved with Inclusive Canada. It takes more education of people understanding that Indigenous people are still here. Indigenous people are not going anywhere. I hate to break it to you, but we're not going anywhere. And we are resilient, but we're tired of being resilient. We are smart. We are empowered. Our culture is so deep. Our culture is so strong to be able to survive from colonialism to modern. If you want to actually do something and get involved, you're more than welcome to come out. I challenge everybody to come out on Bear Clan Patrol, because people will assume they know what the streets are like. They'll assume, oh, I've been there. Back in my day, it was like this. Come out. Just come out. Come out on a Thursday. Pack 250 care packages. Volunteer with us. Get shopping done for us. Because right now we have a great team of volunteers, but some of them I'm sure are tired. You know, come out on a patrol with us. Connect with the people that are unseen in your city. I understand it's scary if you don't want to patrol. I totally get that. Business owners, if they want to get involved with Bear Clan Patrol, step up and follow people like the Border Crossing Bar and Grill, how they support us for Christmas. Step up and help with like the Palomino Smokehouse. I have to give huge props to Arlen and the Palomino Smokehouse team. They donate to us monthly. He donates over 250 hand smoked sandwiches to us that we deliver to people, and people look forward to that meal. You know, if your business, your restaurant wants to do something and they want to give back, they can totally do that if you don't have time to patrol. Share our Instagram stories, share when we're posting, you know, support all of these different things that are happening in Calgary. And it's not just Bear Clan. There's Bear Clan, there's Be the Change YYC, there's Crazy Indian Brotherhood that's out there. There's Sober Crew and AIM that are out there. There's Inclusive Canada that are out there. There's Street Sisters that are out there. There's Angels in Action that are out there. There's Hearts for Humanity that are out there. There is Next Step Ministry and The Walk that are out there. You know, it's not just Dope Team. Dope Team is not just the end all be all right now. And Dope Team can do better. We all can do better. Dope Team needs more support in the fact that they need more people to be driving when we're calling, because they have these great posts and they have these great things that say, oh, call Dope Team if you see somebody freezing. Nobody wants to wait around for another 3 to 4 hours. Those people could be burnt out that are working too. If you want to get active, start coming out, start helping with all of these initiatives I've talked about, and start actually acknowledging our people when you see us. Because after the freedom truck convoys back at home, after all those trucks are back working, after all these people are finished being angry about mandates, Bear Clan's still going to be patrolling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bear Clan's still going to be out there. Bear Clan's still going to be preparing on a Thursday, Friday. We're going to be out servicing on Saturday, Sunday. We're still going to be out in the community. So come out, support. You can reach us. Our phone number is 403-608-2401. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. You can send us an email. It'll come to myself or a member of our team. No question is taboo. You can come out and literally, I challenge everybody. I challenge businesses. I challenge members of city council. I challenge our mayor. I challenge anybody. I challenge Treaty 7 leaders. I challenge everybody to come out and patrol at least once. You know?
Yvonne, you're sharing. Okay, so for those of you, we recorded this, and if you ever want some inspiration, come back to the last 2 minutes and just listen to what Yvonne just said.
I was just speaking to. So I'm going to kind of combine them into a bigger question. But there's some pieces here about care, and kind of by demonstrating this love and doing this work in community, it takes a toll, and it can be really hard. And whether it's kind of showing up constantly can take a toll, but also recognizing a lot of the systemic challenges that keep being faced, and seeing 750,000 get thrown in certain places when we're not seeing that impact, and that can take a toll as well. So there have been a few questions sort of relating to that, and how have the three of you navigated that? How do you care for yourselves? How do you care for each other who are performing this work? So I'm going to group a few of the questions that have come in under that.
So for folks who may not know, I've actually gone through some real serious challenges recently, and I've had community show up for me in ways I didn't expect. It was sometimes food, sometimes it's e-transfers, but honestly, sometimes people sent me just sweet little cards with stickers. I got a bunch of Antifa stickers, just ridiculous things that just made me smile. It's like a rather than somebody sending you a meme through private message, you just like get something in your hand. So self-care. I'm not big on toxic self-care. Like, oh my God, you just need to do a bubble bath every so often and then you're fine. That's ridiculous. Part of the podcast's purpose is to actually try to talk out some of these feelings and ridiculousness that I see on a regular basis. And, and I see videos coming out from Taylor. I see videos coming out from Bear Clan. I think people need to understand that when we, post on Twitter, we're putting out videos, it is part of our self-care as well, because a lot of people, they feel what we're going through. And I can't be with Taylor and Yvonne. I wish I could be when they do everything that they do, but I can't always be. So it does also help me feel connected, because and somebody actually said it in the chat about how jaded you get. Sarcasm. Sarcasm is a coping tool. It's not the best coping tool, but I think at a certain point you just kind of go, okay, this world is like this, and this is how I'm dealing with it the best I can. And community care looks like talking about it with people who get it and who love you. So again, my book club, we let Indigenous speak and we don't have people rebuttal, but also community care sessions can be, BIPOC being in a room. And it was actually done through Community-Wise. We were making bath bombs, and there was 2 questions that just went around, and it was like, what do you feel like after you do an anti-racism session? And it just was so great to hear folks like Taylor or Tyson or folks like that saying it feels like the worst, and it feels like that for a week, and it feels like, constantly gaslighting yourself, like, oh, you should have said this, you should have said that. And it sadly feels so validating having other BIPOC people talk about how ridiculous some of the questions we get are, some of the answers, and feeling like we aren't qualified when we are absolutely qualified. But self-care is just being with people like you who understand you, and sometimes that just means like having a smoke, having a hug, having a laugh, coffee, that's it. And that's enough. And even for me, I'd like to start doing community care via Zoom. I tried to do it for the for folks who do campaigns and such, political folks. But honestly, it was too hard because everybody's too exhausted by the end of it to, get together and talk about how hard the week was. So, you just got to find the right niche for everybody. And honestly, I've been so grateful for the support I've been receiving, but I'll definitely pass it off to Taylor or Yvonne.
Michelle.
Yeah. What is self-care? What is that? I don't know. This is why it's so important that people need to get more activated and involved, because especially again, in this province, it's really is a very small handful of people that are constantly out here doing things. And we are exhausted. And it's really frustrating, because I understand where people are, I understand where they're at. More people makes the work lighter. But to hear people, I'm too tired, or my mental health, or all of these things is why I can't show up. And, as racialized people, especially racialized or Black and Indigenous women, we're sitting here as single parents, running businesses, running organizations, out there every week. During that cold snap, we were out with Bear Clan every day. It was -30, -40 out there. Like, I did my business and everything during the day, took care of my kid. We did online school, made dinner, and we were still out until 2, 3 in the morning. Like, we just don't have, to us, it's like we don't have a choice, because if we don't do it, then nobody's doing it. And then that's not being done, and these people are suffering. And it's like, why? And they don't get an opportunity to rest. They don't get an opportunity to say no. People have to step up and just do the things. And once there's more people involved, more people doing the things, then we all can maybe get a little bit of rest, which is beautiful. Self-care, I watched, there's an organization in Edmonton who had Angela Davis guest speak. And, listening to Angela is just always amazing. But something she had said was community is self-care. And it's like Michelle just said, that is how we fill our cups, is being with each other and helping one another, mutual aid between each other. Also, again, like Michelle said, sometimes it's just having a cigarette, having a glass of wine. Because that's all we could do. That's the capacity we have. Like I just moved to East Village about 6 months ago. So I'm just always in the thick of it too. Like I can never have an opportunity to turn off. Even when I'm just sitting here hanging out, the DI is right there. I have, or not me, but we have all of our unhoused community members in this area that I've made great relationships with. So it's like I'm constantly watching out for them and how I can assist because nobody else is doing that. It's like I'm the only person who lives in East Village because nobody else is running down when there's a drug poisoning happening. Nobody else is running down when somebody's sleeping on the steps of a $250 million building and it's minus 30 and they have no shoes and no jacket and people are just walking by. And, all of these ambulances and emergency vehicles going by, like going to the, it's chaos all of the time. And it's like knowing how simple the solutions are. We act as if changing things and doing better is hard, and it's just, like it's not. It really is not. And that's the level we need to be at. But yeah, so I don't know what self-care is. I'm still working on it, and we just need more people doing the work. That's what I got.
Yeah, repeat that. Like community care for sure. I think that we move ourselves from self-care to community care and really thinking about what that means. Yvonne, what about yourself?
Self-care. Oh my goodness. Self-care is like something I struggle with personally because I never turn it off. The work is like never ending. But when I come home and I'm at home, that's like my sacred space. I try to remember to sleep and eat and shower and all the basics, but also I have really, really, really strong supports that help me and remind me that it's not just up to me. It's like Taylor said, that we need people out here that are helping. We need people to walk with us, right? And if I could totally be like one self-care support that I think we all deserve, Michelle, Taylor, and myself, it's like anybody out there ever want to sponsor us to go to the Nordic Spa, that would be welcomed. For real. It's like we do so much, right, for the community. And Taylor's right, with community is self-care. And the community is our family. And there's only so much we can do, but we're out here trying our best. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Yvonne. I'm going to ask a question that either of you can answer. So this is was the question: how do you scale up services groups like Bear Clan and others who are successful? What risks do you face with scaling up to provide enough services to serve the community that needs them? So any thoughts from either of you about that particular question about scaling up? What that might mean?
Well, I can tell you I've never turned away people at the book club. I can tell you we've never turned away anyone from the Reconciliation Action Group. So honestly, I think it really, I'd love to have that problem of being too big. We don't have a health committee. We don't have a justice committee. We don't have the committees we should have. So for me, I'd love to get there, but honestly, we're still at a real point where there's too much apathy, and understandably where, like, I think of somebody like Vanessa Ortez, who is from Mexico, and she's, here doing great work, and she's seen what the problems were when it came to the gaps with migrant workers, and she stood for migrant rights. Before she got active, she and her daughter had some issues with police that I'm so grateful they shared at our book club. It was the first time having a, woman of color validate their experience. The need for there to be work everywhere is like, I can't even, like, even Yvonne, as much as I want to help with Bear Clan, I know I'm doing what I can do, and there's more I wish I could do. All I can do is retweet her, share her stuff, try to amplify her the best I can. But it's kind of been alluded to. I don't think folks here understand. If you don't like our stuff, you don't comment on our stuff, you don't share it, then we get silenced. So that's why if you watch my social media, like I try to amplify all of the people of color doing the work. And I do that because I know that helps amplify them to some point. And it's even better when the media is like, oh, this is happening, and they contact them. That's even better. But I think a lot of people, I know we talk about performative allyship, but I'm sad to say we don't even get enough of that, frankly. I mean, how hard is it to like, comment, share something? And, it's the same, I don't know, maybe 50 people of color in Calgary that we're the ones amplifying each other because we're not getting the support we should in a so-called time of reconciliation, in a so-called time of understanding Black Lives Matter, in a so-called time of understanding oppression. We're just not getting it, frankly. So I'll just put it right back to Taylor or Yvonne.
And listen, Yvonne is just so humble. Like it could be 50 people in a room. She's like, I'm not talking until everybody talks. Like she will always go last. The question was, what was the issues with upscaling, I guess, or what? Yeah, what came from that?
That was the question. Yeah. And thinking about also, one of the other questions though that I think also kind of pairs well with this is that sense of reciprocity. So we can talk about scaling up all the time, but what does it mean to also have a spirit of reciprocity in that? And I know I'm kind of murking out the question a little bit, but I'm just curious about that.
All right. Yeah, I don't think, I mean, if a mutual aid group is working towards scaling up, right. I don't really know if it's for mutual aid. Like that's not ever our goal. It's just about how can we support people. And it's not even about scaling up because the resources and everything are already there. Everything we need is there. We don't need more of anything. So it's how do we tap into these things and make it available for everybody? And like I saw a part in here too about like, is it relying solely on donations? And it's like, yeah, it relies solely on the community coming together and making that happen. Would we make a compromise? We wanted to open up our own shelter space because obviously the shelters here are not doing it. And, it's something to think about. Okay, well, do we take money from the government, even though they're probably not going to give it to us, but do we take it from them anyway? And I think it's really important that when we are giving to anything, there's no expectations on what the outcome is. So you're not giving and expected for it to go to this certain thing because things come up all of the time, or to get a thanks out of it, or especially when you are serving unhoused people. Sometimes, people are upset when they don't get a thanks, or, the interaction is not to their satisfaction. And it's like, if you are doing something to get something in return, then your heart's not in the right place, so that's why I feel about that. Scaling up, I mean, honestly, to me, the harms or what bad can come from scaling up is just harm from the systems, Everyone saw me being brutally arrested outside of the Calgary Court Center. I mean, even things like that, where were people for that? Where were people while we were there 14 days? But that's what I face when I try to do a scaling up, when I try to bring awareness to something, when I try to hold systems accountable. Those are the dangers that we face, is a lot of backlash and, quite frankly, our lives. I had to move into a secure building because I wasn't safe in my home from white supremacists and the police. That's what I have to do. That's the dangers we face from trying to scale up, so to speak, and trying to make more noise. So yeah, that's what I got.
I'll give the last word to Yvonne if there is one, and then we will go maybe on a quick break. So there was also a question in the chat about how to connect with the Reconciliation Action Group, and there's a couple of links here that I just put in the chat there. But Yvonne, anything to add to that, and then we'll go for like a quick break.
I think there's always room for leveling up. I think there's always room for, and when I think of this, I'm saying it in a level of protection. I'm saying it for protection for people that are doing the work like Michelle and especially Taylor. You know, and leveling up means that when you see somebody like Taylor, a racialized person getting attacked in the street, you don't just stand there and pull out your phone and record it. You know, it's like calling out those kind of acts and holding, like, especially the police accountable for all of the people of color that they've hurt, for the lack of investigation, you know, especially with cases like it's Colton Crowshoe, you know, and Stephanie English's daughters. It's like leveling up is including community. Leveling up is bringing all of these kinds of things to the light. I always challenge media. I always challenge news outlets to not just be performative, to talk about our murdered, missing Indigenous people one day as a headline. The missing children that never returned home that are being uncovered is a headline today. And then it's overshadowed by the truck convoy. You know, if Indigenous people marched on Ottawa, we would have been freaking treated like terrorists, you know? So there's always room for leveling up, especially when you're dealing with Indigenous and people of color, because, you know, we're in Blackfoot territory right now. We're in Treaty 7, and there's always room for safety, and land acknowledgements don't do anything. It's all about land back. Yeah. You know, always about land back, and it's always about those kind of messages that get lost with performative things like, we like to acknowledge we're on Treaty 7. Great, but what are you doing to acknowledge it? Are you helping organizations like Michelle's? Are you helping organizations like Inclusive Canada? Are you sharing stuff, you know? And Michelle is absolutely right. When you share things, it helps amplify our voices, because we're not out here for the spotlight. I'm not out here for the spotlight. I hate doing media. I hate my photo being in the news. And I really don't like it because they don't always accurately report. I would rather much be in support at marches. I would much rather be behind the scenes. I would much rather be the person that is recognized by the unhoused brothers and sisters than a person that's a politician or a media outlet or a white supremacist or anybody that like that. I would rather me be acknowledged for my heart than, you know, anything else, because I never do this for anyone to say, look at me, because I'm not. It's not about me. It's about the people that are forgotten and that we should be serving. So when you talk about leveling up and you talk about, you know, doing that, it's land back includes housing for people. Land back includes decolonizing shelter systems. Land back includes language, culture, you know, honoring those things. And there's so many aspects about it. And I could go on forever, but that's just the start.
Thank you, Yvonne. Yeah, I mean, what I heard there too is like mutual aid is like more love than it is, as cheesy as that sounds, like more of that than necessarily, you know, more money or more resources and more people being involved in that. So I want to thank each and every one of our panelists for sharing tonight. There's so much wisdom, and we've been capturing that throughout this session to really be able to find to as the anti-racism and decolonization action team to really begin to kind of digging down a little bit more what this might mean for us as we think about mutual aid, especially in relationship to community development. I think that you've all demonstrated what that means within your works, but also just in how you show up for us tonight and for others in your communities. So thank you so much. Amanda, I'm curious about whether we take a break or if we go into the thing, but I think we should honor the break, and
Yes.
and we will come back in a few minutes.
5 minutes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll still take a 5-minute break and come back and go into our breakout rooms for about 10 minutes. 'Cause we've been sitting for a long time and we all need to hydrate, et cetera, et cetera. But a huge, huge thank you once again to Michelle, to Taylor, to Yvonne for sharing your time and wisdom with us tonight. Such huge messages, important messages. We're really, really, really grateful. And we know how precious your time is. And so thank you for sharing it with us today. We'll see everyone back here at 7:40.